Hello, everybody. My name is Andrea, and I'm part of the Ineventos team. What is Ineventos? Ineventos is a directory of supplier for events. It was created in Costa Rica, and it's present in 13 countries today. We are a very small company, integrated just by 2 people, Hernan, who is the developer, and myself. Being so small, we have a few competitive advantages over our big competitors. One of them is the ability of making decisions fast, thanks to how reduced we are. However, to take advantage of this, we must be aware of the opportunities offered by new technologies. Doing some research, we came across AMP, and with AMP, we knew we had the opportunity of going a step further. Once we made the decision of using it, we started amplifying our site. After 2 months of gradual changes, we managed to migrate 100% of our main landing pages without the end user noticing it. During the next few minutes, I'll tell you a little bit more about it. We started with our blog with no intention of going much further. As almost everybody did, we started creating an AMP page linked to a non-AMP version of each article of our blog. This AMP page was a simplified version of the non-AMP page, with the content displayed in a horizontally centered column, in order to show static content on the screen of a smartphone. In this way, AMP allowed us to create a version of our blog that ran very fast on mobile devices and stood out in Google searches. However, we were maintaining 2 versions, and we asked ourselves how feasible it would be to just have one version that could properly display on smartphones and laptops and get all the benefits of AMP at the same time. Here we ran into some difficulties. In the first place, our blog shares the same layout as our site, the same header, footer, menu, behavior, and appearance. So we had to create an identical layout using AMP. Secondly, our site and blog use columns and are fully responsive. So we needed a responsive CSS framework that allowed us to create grids with rows and columns. The one column horizontally centered approach was no longer useful. Fortunately, all the official AMP sites are fully AMPed, and this helped us understand how they solve some of the difficulties. We saw that AMP Start uses a lightweight responsive CSS framework called Base CSS, with which we could easily create columns and replicate the responsive behavior of our non-AMP pages, adapting to multiple device sizes. Besides, AMP is responsive by design, and almost every AMP component can be marked as responsive by setting its layout attribute to responsive. These allowed us to have a single AMP version of the blog with an identical layout to the non-AMP. These pages looked the same as before, so that the user could navigate the site and jump between AMP pages and non-AMP pages without perceiving the difference. These pages were responsive. They looked, felt, and worked exactly like their corresponding non-AMP version, but they were much faster. They stood out in searches. They were easy to implement, and they helped us avoid the use of heavy libraries. As a result, we understood that AMP was much more than a tool to display static content. So we started using it as a powerful framework to build the rest of our site. We started with the content pages that, due to their static nature, did not present any major difficulties. A new challenge was presented with the interactive pages. We had to build fully interactive user experiences while maintaining the user-friendly nature of them. And if possible, we had to do it without the user noticing, because the user already knew the appearance and behavior of the site. So we had to do it as seamless as possible and keeping the functionality intact. We continued with the home, product, and category pages, pages that drive the most traffic and are fully interactive. To build these pages, we used AMP Bind, which in combination with other AMP components, gives support for the creation of amazing interactive experiences, achieving awesome results. Let's start with the home page, where we can see a Show More button and a search input field with auto-suggest, which is present in every AMP page header. They were implemented using the same AMP components, AMP Bind, Form, Mustache, and List. Let's start with the Show More button code. When the user presses the Show More button, it submits a form making an AJAX request. The data returned by the server is cached in an AMP state and then populates an AMP list using a Mustache template. When the user types in the search input field, here in the auto-suggest, a request to the server is made, loading search results into an AMP state. An AMP list linked to a Mustache template is populated with the search results returned, rendering the links. In the product pages, we can see request quote, contact, reserve buttons, which we'll explore their implementation later on. We can also see social share buttons implemented through AMP Social Share. We can also see a photo gallery implemented with an AMP carousel. We can see a YouTube video implemented through AMP YouTube, and a Google map implemented through an AMP iframe. In the category pages, we can see the same buttons used in the product pages to request quote and book. We can also see the Google map of each company profile. As you can see, on the same page, we use multiple buttons that implement the same functionality for different listings. For example, all the request quote buttons display the same form. AMP Bind allows us to bind the form with the company being contacted dynamically. So we have just one instance of the request quote form in the page instead of having one for each button. Moreover, exactly the same code is referenced by both product and category pages, avoiding code duplication. These quote requests, which were originally jQuery dialogues, are implemented with a properly styled AMP lightbox containing a form. We use CSS classes to give the AMP lightbox the same appearance and behavior that the former jQuery dialog had. The form contained allows us to validate and submit user input to the server. In here, we can see how we replace the jQuery dialog with AMP Lightbox and some CSS classes. Using the custom validation reporting attribute, we specify the type of validation performed by the form. And through the visible when invalid attribute, we implement it in a declarative way. Below, we can see how when the user presses the request quote button, after setting the state that allows us to dynamically indicate the name and ID of the company contacted, the lightbox is shown. The reservation form allows the user to book a day and time. For this, we also use the AMP Lightbox bind and form components with the same purpose as in the previous case. And we also use the AMP list and AMP mustache components to display the month and day availability. Here in the reservation form, we use 3 AMP state instances, one for availability check and the other 2 to hold the date and time selected by the user. When the user changes the month in the calendar, it triggers a request that retrieves available days in an AMP list with a mustache template. In the same way, when the user selects a date, it triggers a request that retrieves the available hours for that date. With AMP bind, we toggle visibility of month, day, and form views. And perhaps one of the biggest, or let's say the biggest challenge during this adventure was the implementation of the photo attachment, which was present in the non-AMP version, and we had to keep it when we committed to maintaining the functionality of our site intact. For the photo attachments, we use a third-party JavaScript library that simplifies the loading of multiple images from client site. However, there is not yet an AMP component that allows us to solve this requirement. So we chose to isolate just that part of the page on its own non-AMP and include it with an AMP iframe. By doing this, we were able to keep the same user-friendly experience of the previous version. In here, we can see the AMP iframe that allows us to incorporate the functionality of attaching photos to the quote request form. The logic for sending the photos is implemented in a non-AMP page, which uses the jQuery and other third-party libraries. This non-AMP page is linked to the AMP iframe by means of the source attribute dynamically, since in the query string, parameters necessary for the identification of the contacted company are sent. And that was it. All main landing pages were AMPed after a few weeks. Today we have more than 15,000 AMP pages with 0 errors. Page loading time had a decrease of more than 40%, and this resulted in an increasement of more than 10% in conversion rates. Regarding the difficulty, once we changed the mindset of building with JavaScript to building with a more declarative framework, AMP was much easier, required less coding than previous versions, and this resulted in cleaner and less complex code. We believe that AMP facilitated our decision-making process, since we do not have to keep comparing different options of JavaScript frameworks and responsive CSS frameworks, trying to figure out which one is the most suitable one or the most appropriate one. AMP offers what we need. We believe in AMP because we know it's based on solid principles, pushing the web forward, and backed by a large community. In behalf of Hernan and myself, I would like to thank the AMP team, this beautiful country for welcoming us, and all of you. I hope this was useful. Thanks.